Right then, picture the scene, yeah? A proper grand palace, all fancy and posh. The kind of place tourists rubberneck at for hours. But the real favorite knocking about wasn't no lord with a posh accent or a lady dripping in jewels, nah. The real VIP, the one who had the king wrapped around his little finger, or rather, his hoof, was a donkey. This loyal old fella they called Lucky. Now, Lucky wasn't your average, stubborn mule. This bloke was sharp as a tack and dead loyal, always there with a soft nuzzle when the king was feeling a bit down in the dumps. The king, bless his heart, he'd chinwag with that donkey like he was his best mate down the pub, always having a proper natter about the day's goings-on, the state of the kingdom, even his dodgy knee. Then, one bonzer morning, when the sun was shining and the birds were singing their little hearts out, Lucky had a little on. A right cute foal with these massive innocent eyes that could melt the hardest heart. They named him Finn. Well, the whole palace went all gooey-eyed over him, didn't they? The maids would sneak him extra carrots, the guards would give him a gentle scratch behind the ears, and even the grumpy old groundskeeper couldn't help but crack a smile when little Finn came trotting by on his wobbly legs. Even the king, a right stern bloke most of the time, his heart just melted for the little fella. He'd often come down to the stables just to give Finn a pat and whisper silly nonsense in his ear. Lucky, she was a proper mum, always keeping a watchful eye on Finn, nudging him gently with her nose and making sure he didn't wander off and get into trouble. And Finn? He was stuck to his mum like glue, always trotting by her side, his little tail twitching with contentment. The palace lot, they couldn't help but smile at the little one's innocence, the way he'd try to copy his mum's every move, even her big, dramatic sighs when she was feeling a bit put upon. You'd often hear the king having a good old yarn with Lucky, using bits of local slang, reminiscing about old times, and the palace staff cooing over Finn with all sorts of sweet, familiar words, the kind you'd use for your own little nipper. Life in the palace, with the king loyal Lucky and the adorable little Finn, seemed as right as rain. Little did they know, though, that the good times wouldn't last forever. Now, the king, being the king and all, often had to bugger off on important business to other parts of the realm. This time, it was a right crucial meeting with some neighboring bigwigs, something about trade and keeping everyone happy. And like always, his loyal old mate Lucky went along for the ride. Lucky was used to these trips. He'd plod along patiently, the king riding comfortably on his back, through winding country lanes and bustling market towns. Little Finn, though he was still a bit too young to be gallivanting all over the place, so he stayed put in the palace, under the watchful eyes of the stable hands and his loving mum. He'd whicker sadly as they set off, his big eyes following them until they disappeared out of sight. The journey started off as any other, the king and Lucky making good time, the sun shining on their backs. They even stopped for a bit of lunch by a babbling brook, the king sharing his apple with Lucky, like he always did. But then, things took a turn for the worse, a proper nasty turn. Whether it was some dodgy blokes lurking in the shadows, looking to cause trouble for the king, or just a rotten, unforeseen accident. A sudden landslide, maybe, or a rickety old bridge giving way. Things went belly up in a right hurry. In the blink of an eye, the king and his loyal companion Lucky, they both popped their clogs, leaving behind nothing but silence and a whole heap of trouble. When the news finally filtered back to the palace, carried by a breathless messenger on a lathered horse, it was like someone had kicked everyone in the guts. A hush fell over the grand halls, the laughter died down, and tears started to flow freely. The king being gone was a proper tragedy, a real shocker that sent ripples of grief through the entire kingdom. But losing loyal Lucky too? That was like a kick in the teeth. Everyone remembered how much that donkey had meant to the king, his constant companion, his silent confidant. The stable hands wept openly, remembering his gentle nature, and even the stern-faced guards couldn't hide the sadness in their eyes. Back in the quiet stables, little Finn was going spare. He couldn't understand why his mum hadn't come back. Days turned into nights, and still no sign of her. He'd wander around her empty stall, whickering softly, his little hooves clicking on the stone floor. He'd call out for her, a plaintive, heartbreaking sound that echoed through the stillness. The stable hands, their own hearts heavy with grief, tried to comfort him, offering him sweet feed and gentle strokes, but a little unmissing their mum something fierce? It cuts you deep, and no amount of sugary treats can fix that kind of ache. Finn was all alone, a tiny, bewildered figure in a suddenly silent world. His big eyes filled with a growing, gnawing worry. With the king and Lucky gone, the palace felt like a right different place. The joy had buggered off, replaced by a heavy, gloomy atmosphere. Everyone was too wrapped up in their own grief and the upheaval of the new order to pay much mind to a little donkey foal, no matter how cute he was. Finn, still lost and confused about his mum's disappearance, started getting proper peckish. His little tummy would rumble something fierce, and he'd wander around the grand halls, nudging the legs of passing servants, his big eyes pleading for a bit of grub. But most just hurried past, their faces drawn with sadness or worry, barely giving him a second glance. He was just another bit of palace furniture now, easily overlooked in the grand scheme of things. As the days dragged on, Finn got more and more desperate. The fancy feed he used to nibble on didn't taste the same without his mum around, and the stable hands, though not unkind, had their own duties to see to. So, with his belly aching and a heavy heart, Finn decided to take a bit of a gamble. He wandered out of the familiar palace grounds, his little hooves clip-clopping nervously on the cobblestones. He hoped that maybe, just maybe, some kind soul in the nearby houses would take pity on a little lost thing and chuck him a crust of bread or a few wilted veggies. He trotted up to the big oak doors of the grandest houses, peering in with hopeful eyes. But the well-dressed folk inside just shooed him away, their noses turned up at a scruffy little donkey bothering their fancy gardens. He tried the smaller cottages, where the common folk lived, folks who looked like they knew a thing or two about hardship. He'd nuzzle at their doors, let out a soft, pleading whicker. But they too seemed to have their own worries. Some were struggling to feed their own families. Others were just plain suspicious of a palace animal turning up on their doorstep. Doors were slammed in his face. Harsh words were muttered under breaths, and poor Finn, his hope dwindling with every rejection, was left feeling more alone and unwanted than ever before. The local kids, who might have usually offered a bit of playful attention, were now under strict orders from their parents to keep away from the sad little donkey from the palace. It was a right cold shoulder all round for the poor little fella. Heartbroken and worn out from all the rejections, Finn ended up wandering miles away from the grand palace that had once been his home. His little legs were aching, his throat was dry, and he was proper knackered, the kind of tired that makes you just want to lie down and give up. He'd lost all sense of direction, just plodding along dusty paths, his head hanging low with despair. Then, just when he thought he couldn't take another step under the sprawling branches of this big, old oak tree in the middle of nowhere, Finn stumbled across another kid. This one was all on his own too, a scruffy little boy, clearly an orphan, with sad eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. His name was Alfie. Both of them were right down on their luck, hungry enough to eat a horse, if they could catch one, and carrying a heavy load of loneliness. Alfie, even though he had bugger all himself, just a tattered bit of blanket and a few grubby coins in his pocket, he seemed to understand what Finn was going through. Maybe it was the lost look in Finn's big eyes, or maybe Alfie had just learned a thing or two about being on your own. Whatever it was, Alfie, bless his kind heart, reached into his pocket and pulled out what little food he had, a bit of stale bread he'd been saving and a bruised apple he'd found earlier. He offered it to Finn, who gratefully munched it down, his tail giving a little hopeful twitch for the first time in days. Alfie then led Finn to a nearby stream, where the little donkey drank his fill of cool, clear water. In that tough moment, Alfie's simple act of kindness gave Finn a tiny spark of hope, a little flicker in the darkness. They stuck together, finding a strange sort of comfort in each other's company. Alfie would talk to Finn in a soft voice, telling him stories of his own hard knocks, and Finn would nuzzle against Alfie, his soft muzzle a silent offering of companionship. They'd share whatever scraps of food Alfie could find, and at night, they'd huddle together under the big oak tree for warmth. A quiet friendship began to blossom between the lonely boy and the lost foal, a strong, silent bond forged in shared hardship. It was a proper emotional scene, those two lost souls finding solace in each other when the rest of the world had turned a blind eye. Alfie and Finn, the orphan boy and the little donkey, carried on living together in the wilds. They weren't exactly living the high life, mind you, but they had each other, and that made all the difference. Finn, thanks to Alfie's steady care and the regular grub, started to fill out and get his strength back. He'd spend his days trotting alongside Alfie as they explored the woods, his earlier sadness slowly fading. But every now and then, Finn would do something a bit peculiar. He'd suddenly veer off in a certain direction, his ears pricked up like he was following some faint memory. He'd often head towards a particular patch of overgrown bushes or an oddly shaped rock, sniffing the ground as if searching for something he couldn't quite place. Alfie, always curious, would follow him, wondering what the little donkey was up to. Then, one day, Finn's strange wanderings led them to something truly unexpected. He pushed his way through a thick tangle of ivy and stopped in front of a crumbling stone wall, almost hidden by the surrounding trees. Behind it was a small, dark opening. Finn nudged Alfie with his head, then cautiously stepped inside. Alfie followed, his heart thumping with a mixture of apprehension and excitement. The opening led to a narrow, winding passage, and at the end of it, in a dusty, forgotten chamber, lay a treasure trove. It was the old royal treasury, a place everyone in the kingdom had long since forgotten about, tucked away and lost to time. Piles of gold coins gleamed in the dim light, alongside chests filled with sparkling jewels and other valuable bits and bobs. Alfie's jaw practically hit the floor. Now the big question was, how did Finn know about this place? Maybe, just maybe, his mum, Lucky, had shown him the way when he was just a tiny foal, a secret known only to the king and his most trusted companion. Or perhaps Finn had, in his early days at the palace, just happened to see the king sneaking off to this hidden location, a fleeting image imprinted on his young mind. Whatever the reason, this little donkey had just stumbled upon a discovery that would change both his and Alfie's lives forever. With the discovery of the royal treasury, Alfie's life took a dramatic turn. He wasn't a poor orphan anymore. He was wealthy beyond his wildest dreams. But Alfie, being the decent sort he was, didn't let the riches go to his head. He used his newfound wealth to help the people in the surrounding villages, sharing his good fortune and earning their respect and admiration. He built better homes, provided food for the hungry, and generally made life a bit brighter for everyone. Years passed, and Alfie's kindness and fair rule didn't go unnoticed. When the old king's distant relatives proved to be, well, a bit rubbish at running things, the people naturally turned to Alfie. He was wise, he was fair, and he had a good heart. Before long, the orphan boy who'd once scrounged for scraps was crowned the new king of the land. Once he was king, Alfie never forgot the hard times, and he certainly never forgot his loyal friend, Finn, who now lived a life of comfortable retirement in the royal stables. One day, during a royal address to his people, Alfie recounted his own story, the loneliness of being an orphan, the kindness Finn had shown him in leading him to the treasure, and the coldness he'd experienced when he and Finn were most in need. He reminded them of the little donkey Foal who'd been turned away from their doors, a creature connected to the old king's household, a creature deserving of compassion. Alfie's words hit home. The people, remembering the sad little donkey, felt a deep sense of shame and regret for their past indifference. They finally understood the value of kindness, even towards the seemingly smallest and most insignificant beings. Finn, now a dignified older donkey, stood beside Alfie during this address, a living testament to their enduring bond. The sight of the king, once a penniless orphan, standing alongside the donkey who'd been his first friend, was a powerful reminder of the importance of empathy and remembering even the smallest acts of kindness. The story of the forgotten foal and the boy who showed him compassion became a legend in the kingdom, a tale passed down through generations, teaching everyone that true wealth lies not just in gold, but in the kindness we show to others, no matter how humble.